God, I can't believe this is happening. Right now, in front of everyone. I've planned 100-person galas without a hitch, but here I am, standing like an idiot at my mother-in-law's birthday dinner in freaking Rome, and there's no chair for me, no place setting, nothing. Just a perfect gap where I should be, like I'm some ghost nobody believed would show up. Helena's smiling that practiced smile of hers, the one that never reaches her eyes when she looks at me. 7 years of marriage to her precious Renato, and I'm still the American intruder. The event planner who couldn't possibly understand family traditions. Oh dear, they must have miscounted, Helena says, her Italian accent thickening conveniently. Renato, darling, ask for another setting. And my husband, the man who promised to always have my back? He laughs, actually throws his head back and laughs like this is the funniest thing that's happened all year. Classic Italian restaurant chaos, he says, squeezing my arm a little too tight. Just wait a minute, Leah. It's no big deal. No big deal. Sure. Just like it was no big deal when they conveniently forgot to include me in the family Christmas card last year. Or when Helena accidentally sent my birthday gift to my old address, 3 years after we moved. I scan the table, 14 perfectly arranged place settings for 15 people. Marco, Renato's brother, catches my eye and quickly looks away. His wife Sophia at least has the decency to look embarrassed. Cousin Bianca is practically giddy, whispering something to her husband. The rest of them just stare at their menus, suddenly fascinated by pasta options. The restaurant is gorgeous, picture-perfect Roman elegance with the Colosseum glowing amber through massive windows. Any other time, I'd be snapping photos for inspiration. Now I'm fighting tears, my professional mask slipping. A waiter approaches, and I straighten my spine. 7 years of this bullshit. 7 years of trying to win over a family that decided I wasn't good enough before they even met me. Excuse me, I say, capturing the waiter with the smile I use for difficult clients. I need to speak with the manager immediately. Renato's hand finds my wrist. Leah, don't make a scene. I pull away from him, switch to the little Italian I've taught myself since Helena forgot to include me in the family language lessons. Mi scusi, sono Leah Morgan Bianchi, event planner for Ellison Group. I hand the waiter my business card, the one with our international partnerships listed. There seems to be a problem with our reservation. Helena's eyes narrow. She recognizes something in my tone, the same authority I use when commanding rooms of socialites and CEOs. For the first time in 7 years, she looks worried. My phone buzzes, a text from Renato. What are you doing? I ignore it, watching the manager approach. My heart's racing, but my voice is steady. If there's one thing I've learned in this business, it's that respect isn't given, it's commanded. And if this family thinks I'm just going to keep taking their contempt lying down, they're about to learn exactly who they've been messing with all these years. I used to think hard work was all it took. Funny how naive that sounds now. 7 years ago, I was running my ass off at the Blackwood Foundation Gala, clipboard in hand, earpiece crackling with crisis after crisis. 300 Boston elites sipping champagne, and I'm the invisible maestro making sure no one sees the chaos behind the curtain. That was my superpower. The centerpiece delivery was late. The keynote speaker was drunk. And then some waiter spilled red wine on Mrs. Montgomery's white Chanel, classic disaster trifecta. You handle problems like you were born solving them, a voice said behind me, just as I finished calming Mrs. Montgomery down. That was Renato, tall, Italian-born with that slight accent that made everything sound like poetry. Harvard Business School pedigree. Family money older than my entire hometown. He wasn't just handsome. He looked at me like he could actually see me. God, I fell hard. 3 dates in, he flew me to New York just for dinner. By month 2, I was meeting his friends. All old money, all perfectly polite while they assessed whether I belonged in their world. The first time I met Helena was at their summer home in the Berkshires. I brought an expensive bottle of wine I could barely afford. She took one look at it and handed it to the housekeeper without a word. My son tells me you're creative with your little parties, she said, pronouncing creative like it was a disease. Self-made, aren't you? How American. I should have known then. But Renato squeezed my hand and whispered, "She'll warm up. She's just protective." That night, I overheard them arguing in Italian. I only caught fragments. My name, something about suitable and temporary. When Renato returned to our room, he kissed me harder than usual. "They just don't know you yet," he promised. The engagement came fast, 8 months in. The ring was massive, old world, and ornate. "It's been in our family for generations," Renato said proudly. I later learned his cousin Bianca was supposed to receive it. The look she gave me at the engagement dinner could have frozen hell. The wedding was a compromise, half intimate, my choice, half spectacle, his family's. My parents looked so out of place among the Bianchi dynasty. Dad kept tugging at his rented tux. Mom kept checking if she was using the right fork. Helena patted my cheek at the reception. "You clean up quite nicely," she said. "Perhaps there's hope for you yet." I thought I could win them over with time. I took Italian lessons secretly, studied wine regions, art history. I mothballed my Boston accent, learned which designers were acceptable to wear. I worked twice as hard at my career, thinking success would make me worthy. 2 years in, I landed the Hamilton Pierce wedding, biggest society event that season. Renato brought Helena to the reception. I overheard her say to someone, "Yes, my daughter-in-law arranged all this. She's quite good at service." Still, there were moments I thought we were breaking through. The time Helena asked for my opinion on renovating their Rome apartment. When Marco's wife Sophia started inviting me for coffee. The Christmas Renato's father actually toasted my successful year. I clung to those breadcrumbs like they were feasts. Last year, I found a text on Renato's phone from Helena. "Is she still insisting on children? Remember our discussion?" When I confronted him, he laughed it off. "Mother's old-fashioned. She'll love our children when they arrive." But something in his eyes shifted when he said it. Something cold and calculating that matched the look I'd seen too many times across the Bianchi dinner table. Now, standing in this perfect Roman restaurant with no place for me, it's like the past 7 years suddenly make sense. The whispers, the forgotten invitations, the way conversation switches to Italian when topics turn serious. I've been fighting so hard to belong that I never stopped to ask if I wanted to belong to them at all. I've always had an eye for details. It's what makes me good at my job. The slight misalignment of a centerpiece, a vendor's hesitation when discussing deadlines, the way a client's smile doesn't match their tone, I catch everything. So how the hell did I miss what was happening in my own marriage? Planning Helena's 68th birthday in Rome should have been just another challenge. Difficult, yes. Anything involving my mother-in-law is, but manageable. I'd spent months coordinating with Italian vendors, navigating time zones and translating contracts. Helena wanted elegant but understated, which is rich person code for obscenely expensive, but don't let anyone see the price tag. The first red flag appeared 3 weeks before we flew to Italy. The deposit for the Villa Aurelia Gardens, where the main celebration would happen after the restaurant dinner, hadn't gone through. When I called the venue, they said the transfer had been reversed. "Must be a bank error," Renato said, barely looking up from his laptop. "I'll handle it tomorrow." The next day, the caterer called. Same issue. Then the florist. Each time, Renato had an explanation. Banking protocols, international transfer limits, simple misunderstandings. I started sleeping less, triple-checking everything, sending morning confirmation emails to all vendors. This was Helena's birthday, after all. One mistake, and I'd never hear the end of it. "The American couldn't handle Italian business," she'd say, that thin smile cutting across her face. Then came that Thursday night. Renato was showering. His phone on the nightstand kept lighting up with notifications. I never checked his messages, not my style, but something felt off. The screen preview showed, "Beatrice, we need to talk about the baby. My doctor says..." My fingers moved before my brain could catch up. I typed in his passcode, my birthday, ironically. And there it was, months of conversations with Beatrice Moretti, his college girlfriend from Rome, hundreds of messages, plans to meet, money transfers, photos of her growing belly, promises about their future together. The shower kept running while I read message after message, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Helena is finally coming around to the idea of the divorce, he'd written to her in January. Once the family business transition is complete, we'll no longer need Leah's connections or her signature. My signature? I scrolled frantically, finding mentions of the Boston properties, the new funding round, transferring the assets. None of it made sense, until suddenly, horribly, it did. I put his phone back exactly as I'd found it, then went downstairs to his home office. The file cabinet was locked, but I knew where he kept the key. Inside, I found copies of documents I'd signed over the years: investment authorizations, property transfers, loan agreements, many of them subtly different from what I remembered signing. The next morning, I called my assistant Jenny back in Boston. "I need you to do something discreetly," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Check the status of the Ellison-Bianchi partnership accounts. Don't tell anyone, just let me know what you find." 2 hours later, she texted, "Most accounts showing minimal balances. Transfers to Milano Holdings LLC over past 18 months. Should I be worried?" Milano Holdings, the company Helena had established to streamline family investments that Renato had persuaded me to co-sign for last year. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I became a detective in my own life. I photographed documents, downloaded bank statements, recorded phone conversations, found emails between Renato, Helena, and their family lawyer discussing how to legally separate Leah from her interests without triggering contractual protections. All while smiling at breakfast, kissing him goodbye, packing for Rome, planning the perfect birthday for the woman who'd orchestrated my professional and personal destruction. The night before our flight, I found myself staring at Renato while he slept. 7 years together. How had I missed the coldness behind his eyes, the calculation in his touch? Easy. I saw what I wanted to see. The charming man who swept me off my feet, the successful marriage I'd worked so hard for, the family I'd never had growing up. Every perfectly planned event in my career had a contingency strategy, a backup for when things went wrong. But I had no contingency for this, discovering that my entire marriage was built on quicksand, that the people I'd tried so desperately to please had been systematically undermining me all along. On the plane to Rome, while Renato slept beside me, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I named it Scorched Earth. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. And unlike them, I wouldn't need to cheat to win. The restaurant incident wasn't just an insult, it was their first public move. They thought I was breaking. They had no idea I was finally seeing clearly for the first time in 7 years. The Hotel Excelsior wasn't just any 5-star Roman establishment. I'd selected it after rejecting 17 others. The ballroom's acoustics, the lighting that flattered aging skin, the terrace view that made the Colosseum look like a personal backdrop for photos, every detail calculated to make Helena shine on her special day. The night before, I'd stayed until 2 a.m. supervising the floral installations, nitpicking the table settings, testing the sound system myself. It was during that final walkthrough that I first saw it, the seating chart displayed on an elegant gilded easel. 14 places, 15 family members. I counted twice, then pulled out my phone to check the confirmation emails. "Is there a problem, Signora Bianchi?" The event manager approached, all Italian efficiency wrapped in Armani. "The head count," I said. "We confirmed 15 for dinner." He consulted his tablet. No. Signora Helena Bianchi specifically confirmed 14 yesterday. She was quite insistent. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. "May I see the communication?" He hesitated, then turned his tablet toward me. There it was, an email from Helena's personal account, sent at 9:43 p.m. "Please ensure the table is set for 14 guests only. The 15th person will not be joining us for dinner after all. This is final." I maintained my professional smile while something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. "Thank you, just a miscommunication." That night, I didn't confront Renato. I watched him pack his toiletry bag, the one I'd given him for our 3rd anniversary, whistling some Italian folk song his grandfather had taught him. His phone buzzed with a text from Helena. "Everything is arranged for tomorrow. She won't make a scene in public." He'd left his phone unlocked. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I slept beside my husband for what I already knew would be one of the last times, mentally cataloging every document I'd need to collect, every account I'd need to freeze, every ally I'd need to contact. The warmth of his body next to mine felt like a furnace of betrayal. The morning of the dinner, I dressed meticulously. A burgundy Valentino I'd bought specifically for this trip. Helena had once mentioned it was her least favorite color on me. "Washes you out completely, dear," she'd said with mock concern. I paired it with the diamonds Renato had given me for our 5th anniversary. Pieces I'd later discovered were family heirlooms that should have gone to Bianca's daughter. Throughout the day, I watched the family's coordinated dance of exclusion. Marco's wife, Sophia, accidentally giving me the wrong time for pre-dinner drinks. Cousin Bianca loudly discussing family-only breakfast plans for the following morning. Helena's subtle frowns whenever I entered a room, like I was tracking dirt onto her Persian rugs. At 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes before our reservation, Helena gathered everyone in the hotel lobby. She wore a custom Chanel suit and enough diamonds to finance a small country. "We should head over now. The restaurant is very strict about holding reservations, even for old friends like us." Her eyes slid past me as she did a mental count of her flock. In the short walk to the restaurant, Renato stayed 3 steps ahead of me, engrossed in conversation with his brother. 7 years ago, he would have kept his hand at the small of my back, leaning down occasionally to whisper observations in my ear. Now he walked as if I didn't exist. The maitre d' greeted Helena like visiting royalty, leading our procession through the restaurant. I counted as we walked. 1, 2, 3, 13, 14 chairs. The table formed a perfect circle in the private dining room, candlelight flickering over expensive crystal and gleaming silver. No 15th place, no awkward gap, just a mathematically precise arrangement that excluded me by design. "Oh dear," Helena said, her voice dripping with artificial concern. "It seems there's been some confusion with the reservation." Renato's laugh, the same laugh I'd once found so charming, echoed against marble walls. Classic Italian restaurants, always a bit chaotic with the bookings. I stood there, Valentino dress and borrowed diamonds, watching the family exchange glances that ranged from embarrassed to amused to satisfied. 7 years of trying to belong, of planning perfect events for these people, of building my business while supporting Renato's ambitions, all of it crystallized in that moment of public humiliation. But they'd miscalculated. They thought I'd crumble. Instead, something else entirely was happening inside me. In that silent moment, surrounded by Bianchi family members who'd never accepted me, I felt my professional mask lock into place. The same calm, controlled focus that had seen me through impossible deadlines and demanding clients settled over me like armor. They wanted a scene? I'd give them a performance they'd never forget. The thing about being an event planner, a good one, is that you understand power. Not the obvious kind that comes with money or family names, but the invisible infrastructure that makes everything work. You know who controls the reservations, who can bypass the wait list, who owes you favors. You understand the delicate ecosystem of luxury services better than the people who consume them. As I stood in that restaurant with no chair waiting for me, I felt strangely calm. This wasn't just humiliation, it was liberation. The final confirmation that I owed these people nothing. "Excuse me," I said to the maitre d', extracting myself from Renato's patronizing grip on my arm. "Antonio, isn't it? I believe we spoke yesterday." Recognition flickered in his eyes. Of course he remembered me. I'd been the one coordinating with the restaurant for weeks, not Helena. "Perhaps we could speak privately for a moment. A small issue with the arrangements." The Bianchis exchanged glances as I stepped away with Antonio. In the small office adjacent to the kitchen, I dropped the pleasant mask. "There's been a significant change of plans," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'm canceling this entire reservation." His eyes widened. "Signora, this is most irregular." "What's irregular is charging $8,000 to my company account yesterday, then removing my place setting today." I showed him the transaction on my banking app. "Since I personally guaranteed this booking through Morgan Bianchi Events, I'm exercising my right to cancel." I forwarded him an email I'd prepared earlier. "Here's my official cancellation. I've already spoken with Roberto." Roberto being the owner, whom I'd met at a hospitality conference in Milan last year. Antonio paled. The Bianchi family are longtime patrons, and they're free to dine here anytime, just not on my company's credit line. They'll need to provide a different method of payment tonight. While he processed this, I was already sending a cascade of prepared emails from my phone. To the Villa Aurelia, canceling tomorrow's garden party. To the vintage Rolls-Royce service that would have transported Helena around Rome. To the private museum tour guide, the photographer, the sommelier I'd flown in from Tuscany. Each cancellation included the same language. Due to contractual violations, all services arranged through Morgan Bianchi Events are hereby terminated. All deposits are to be returned to the originating business account immediately. Years of building relationships in this industry were finally paying off. Within minutes, responses began flooding in. Confirmations, concerned questions, offers of assistance. My favorite came from Lucia at Villa Aurelia. Understood completely. The alternate event you requested is confirmed for tomorrow. Your clients will never know what they missed. Those clients being certain members of the Milan fashion industry who'd always supported my career, people Helena had deliberately excluded from her guest list. Back in the dining room, Helena was holding court, probably explaining away my absence as some emotional American reaction. I approached the table, professional smile firmly in place. I apologize for the interruption, I announced. There's been a change in arrangements. Antonio will be with you shortly to discuss payment options. Renato stood up. Leah, what are you talking about? Your family wanted me excluded from dinner. I'm respecting that wish by removing my company's financial backing as well. I turned to Helena. You'll need to provide your credit card. The full amount is due tonight, as per the contract you signed. The stunned silence was worth every second of humiliation I'd endured. This is ridiculous, Helena finally sputtered. Renato, control your wife. My husband's face darkened. Leah, outside, now. But I was already turning away, my phone continuing its symphony of liberation, as notification after notification confirmed my instructions were being carried out across Rome. One more thing, I added, looking directly at Helena. The suite you're staying in at the Excelsior? The one with the terrace overlooking the Colosseum? It was booked under my corporate account as well. You have until midnight to make alternative arrangements. As I walked out, I heard the maitre d' explaining to the table that, yes, unfortunately, the reservation had indeed been cancelled, and yes, they would need to provide payment immediately if they wished to stay. In the taxi back to the hotel, I forwarded copies of every incriminating document I'd collected to my lawyer in Boston, my assistant, and a secure cloud account. Emails discussing how to manipulate my business assets. Bank transfers to Milano Holdings LLC. The prenuptial agreement with Renato's handwritten notes on circumventing certain clauses. Then I called the one person I knew would understand exactly what I was doing. Sophia, it's Leah. I think it's time we had that conversation you've been avoiding for years. Marco's wife had her own reasons to resent the Bianchi family, and unlike the rest of them, she had actually tried to warn me, in her own subtle, frightened way. Tonight was just the opening move. The real game was about to begin. The Aroma restaurant glowed like a jewel box against the Roman twilight. The Colosseum bathed in golden light beyond its panoramic windows. I'd arrived 90 minutes before the reservation, slipping in through the staff entrance where the head chef, Marco Sardelli, greeted me with the respect reserved for valued business partners. Everything is prepared exactly as you requested, Signora Morgan Bianchi, he assured me, leading me through the kitchen where his team worked with practiced precision. The private dining room, the special menu cards, the champagne, all perfect. I chose my midnight blue Stella McCartney deliberately, a power dress I'd worn to close my biggest client contracts. Not the burgundy Valentino that Helena despised, but something that declared my authority without speaking a word. And the seating arrangement? I asked, following him into the immaculate private dining room. Exactly as specified in your final email. He gestured to the elegant table where 15 place settings gleamed under crystal chandeliers. The family will be quite surprised by the changes. That's the plan, I said, running my finger along the embossed menu cards I'd had rush delivered that morning. Each bore the guest's name in gold calligraphy, with Helena's card slightly larger and positioned at her place, a detail she would notice immediately. What she wouldn't notice until later was the QR code embossed on the back of each card, linking to a private cloud folder I'd prepared. At 8:15 p.m., I watched from near the kitchen as they arrived. Helena first, draped in Chanel and diamonds, flanked by Antonio, Renato's father, who'd maintained a convenient silence throughout my years in the family. Then Marco and Sophia catching my eye with a barely perceptible nod. Cousins Bianca and Paolo, Aunt Lucia, the entire Bianchi dynasty in their finery, with Renato arriving last, his expression stormy as he scanned the restaurant. The maitre d' led them to the private room where I'd been hiding in plain sight, observing from a strategic corner position. Their collective pause at the doorway was magnificent. 15 place settings, when Helena had explicitly instructed 14. "There must be some mistake," Helena said sharply to the maitre d', switching to rapid Italian. "No mistake, Signora Bianchi," he replied smoothly. The final arrangement was confirmed this afternoon by the event planner. Helena's head swiveled like an owl's, finally spotting me in my corner. "You," she said, her voice low but carrying across the room. "I thought we had settled this misunderstanding." I approached the table with measured steps. The only misunderstanding was mine, thinking I was ever welcome in this family. Renato moved toward me, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Leah, enough dramatics. You're embarrassing yourself." "Actually," I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm through being embarrassed. 7 years is enough, don't you think?" I gestured to the table. "Please, everyone, take your seats. The champagne is already chilled, and Chef Sardelli has prepared Helena's favorite risotto with white truffles." Confusion rippled through the group as they hesitantly found their name cards and sat down. I remained standing. "Aren't you joining us?" Antonio asked, the first direct question he'd addressed to me in months. "I'm not sure I belong at this table," I said. After all, Helena made it quite clear when she instructed the restaurant to set 14 places yesterday. Helena's face flushed. "This is hardly the time or place." "It's exactly the time and place," I interrupted, something I'd never dared do before. "In public, surrounded by witnesses, just how you planned my humiliation." I lifted my champagne flute. "A toast to Helena on her 68th birthday. May she enjoy her celebration knowing exactly what it cost." As if on cue, servers entered with the first course, delicate seafood antipasti, placing them before each stunned family member. "I've taken the liberty of handling the bill," I continued, "since my company's name is on all the contracts. Consider it my parting gift." Renato stood up, knocking his chair backward. "Leah, whatever game you're playing." "It's no game." I met his eyes directly. "Just like it was no game when you and your mother diverted funds from our joint ventures to Milano Holdings, or when you rekindled your relationship with Beatrice Moretti, or when you systematically undermined my business relationships in Europe." The room went deadly silent. Even the servers paused. "What nonsense is this?" Helena demanded, but her voice wavered slightly. I smiled. "The QR code on the back of your menu cards links to a rather interesting collection of documents. Emails, bank transfers, phone recordings. I particularly recommend the video of Renato meeting Beatrice at Hotel Eden last month. The angle catches her baby bump quite clearly." Sophia gasped. Marco's hand froze halfway to his wine glass. "You've all excelled at making me feel invisible," I said, voice steady despite my racing heart. "Now I'm giving you what you wanted. I'm disappearing from your lives, but not before ensuring you understand exactly who you've been dealing with all this time." I set down my untouched champagne flute as phones began to emerge, QR codes being scanned with trembling fingers. "Buon appetito," I said, turning to leave. "And happy birthday, Helena. I hope it's exactly what you deserve." The explosion wasn't immediate. Dynasty implosions rarely are. It started with small tremors, canceled lunch meetings, sudden family emergencies, hushed phone conversations in bathroom stalls. The first 48 hours after the dinner felt like watching a slow-motion car crash from a safe distance. I checked into a different hotel that night, the elegant Portrait Roma, where the manager personally assured me of absolute privacy. From my terrace suite, I watched Rome twinkle below and methodically executed the second phase of what I now thought of as Operation Scorched Earth. By midnight, every document had been delivered to its intended destination: financial records to the Italian tax authorities, evidence of fund misappropriation to business partners, loan documentation to banks, and the most damning personal materials to those who needed warning, including Beatrice's husband. My phone vibrated constantly with notifications, which I silenced except for a select few contacts. My assistant Jenny in Boston sent hourly updates. Ellison Group called. They're freezing all joint ventures with Bianchi International pending investigation. Your lawyer got the emergency injunction. All shared accounts are frozen. Milan office reports 3 canceled meetings with Bianchi representatives this morning. They're asking for guidance. Sophia texted at 3 a.m. Marco confessed everything. They've been planning this for over a year. I'm leaving him. Can we talk? By dawn, Renato's family was in full damage control mode. Security camera footage from the hotel lobby, courtesy of the sympathetic manager, showed Helena arriving at 6 a.m. for an emergency family meeting, her perfect composure fractured, makeup hastily applied. Antonio arrived minutes later, leaning heavily on his cane. Marco, Bianca, even cousins who'd flown in just for the birthday, all summoned before breakfast. The Italian business world is built on reputation and connections. By noon, whispers had become murmurs. A financial journalist I'd met at a charity gala sent a discreet inquiry about unusual activities at Bianchi International. 2 long-standing clients of my event planning business called to express their continued loyalty, regardless of personal difficulties. Corporate code for "we're choosing sides, and it's not your husband's." Renato called 17 times before I answered on the 18th. Where are you? His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual charm. Safe, I replied, which is more than I can say for your family's reputation. You have no idea what you've done. The desperation in his voice was new. I'd never heard Renato anything but confident. Father had a minor heart episode this morning. Is that what you wanted? What I wanted was a husband who didn't conspire with his mother to defraud me. What I wanted was a family that didn't plan my public humiliation. What I wanted was the truth. We can fix this. The negotiator emerged. Come back, we'll talk. Everything can be explained. Like you explained meeting Beatrice while I was planning your mother's birthday? Or the $2.7 million transferred from our joint venture to Milano Holdings? His breath caught. You weren't supposed to find that. Clearly. The coldness in my voice surprised even me. Your mistake was thinking the event planner who manages billion-euro corporate launches wouldn't notice discrepancies in her own life. 3 days in, the financial consequences began cascading. A planned expansion of Bianchi International's luxury hotel division was indefinitely postponed. 2 board members resigned, citing personal reasons. Helena's charitable foundation announced she was stepping back temporarily due to health concerns. The Bianchi name had opened doors throughout Europe for generations. Now those same doors were closing, one by one. On the 5th day, I received a formal letter from Antonio's lawyer offering a settlement. The amount was substantial, the conditions severe: complete confidentiality, return of all documents, a joint statement about an amicable separation. I forwarded it to my lawyer without response. On the 7th day, the first news article appeared, subtle but devastating. Financial irregularities prompt review of Bianchi International partnerships. No mention of personal scandals, just enough financial details to send their stock down 12% by closing. Renato's final text came that night. You've destroyed everything. I hope it was worth it. I stared at those words in my Roman hotel room. The Colosseum lit up in the distance. The empire that had seemed so impenetrable, that had made me feel so small for 7 years, was crumbling from within, exposed not by an army, but by their own arrogance and the woman they'd thought they could easily discard. Worth it? I typed back. Ask your mother. She's the one who decided I didn't deserve a seat at the table. Then I blocked his number and opened my laptop to finalize plans for my return to Boston. Not as the disgraced American wife, but as the woman who refused to be erased. 3 months after the Rome disaster, that's how I'd started thinking of it, A disaster for them, but a liberation for me. I stood in my new Boston office overlooking the harbor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furnishings, and not a single trace of the Bianchi aesthetic that had slowly infiltrated my life over 7 years. The divorce papers had been filed within days of my return from Italy. My lawyer, Catherine, a steely veteran of high-profile separations, had warned me it could get ugly. "They'll fight dirty," she'd said during our first meeting. "People with generational wealth always do." "They already fought dirty," I'd replied. "Now they're just doing it in the open." She wasn't wrong. The first counteroffer from Renato's attorneys was insulting, demanding I return family heirlooms, the jewelry he'd given me, suggesting I'd manipulated financial documents, even implying I'd somehow entrapped him into marriage for business advantages. I laughed when Catherine showed me. They still don't get it, do they? This was never about money. The divorce proceedings became a sort of background noise to my rebuilding efforts. Morgan Events rose from the ashes of Morgan Bianchi with surprising speed. Clients who'd worked with me over the years made their loyalties clear. The high-profile corporate accounts stayed. The society matrons who'd only hired me because of the Bianchi name disappeared, which felt like addition by subtraction. Jenny, my assistant who'd become my right hand during the chaos, was now my official partner. She'd been offered double her salary by a competitor trying to capitalize on my supposed downfall, and had responded by showing me the offer letter and saying, "Just tell me what you need to beat this." Instead of matching it, I'd given her equity. We celebrated with champagne in plastic cups on the bare floor of our new office space before a single piece of furniture had arrived. "To burning it all down and building something better," she'd toasted. Sophia arrived in Boston 6 weeks after Rome, shell-shocked but determined. She'd left Marco, taking only personal belongings and documentation of her own. Apparently, I'd inspired a trend. I helped her find an apartment and introduced her to contacts in the design world, her field before marrying into the Bianchi vortex. "I watched them plan it all," she confessed over dinner one night. "The way they would slowly edge you out, take what they needed from your business connections, then discard you. Helena orchestrated everything. She never thought you were good enough for Renato." "She was right," I replied. "I was too good for all of them." We laughed until we cried, two women who'd escaped the same burning building. News from Italy came in sporadic bursts. Bianchi International's stock had stabilized, but at a significantly lower value. 2 board members had been quietly replaced. The Milan office had downsized. Helena's charitable foundation announced a restructuring. Renato was now reportedly living in their Lake Como property, rarely seen in Rome or Milan society. And Beatrice Moretti had given birth to a son, father unconfirmed on the birth certificate. The final divorce decree arrived on a crisp fall morning. Catherine hand-delivered it, along with confirmation that the settlement was done. I'd gotten everything I'd asked for, which was less than I was entitled to, but exactly what I needed. Full ownership of Morgan Events, the Boston apartment, and a clean break with no ongoing financial entanglements. "You could have taken him for millions more," Catherine said, puzzled by my moderation. "I didn't want anything that would keep us connected," I explained. "Clean cuts heal better." That night, I hosted a small gathering on the rooftop of my building. Just 12 people, my closest friends, Jenny and her husband, Sophia, Catherine, and a few loyal clients who'd become friends. No elaborate floral arrangements, no custom menus, none of the trappings I orchestrated daily for others. Just good wine, simple food, and genuine laughter under string lights with the Boston skyline glittering around us. My phone buzzed with a text from an Italian number. "Renato. I hope you're satisfied with what you've done to my family." 7 months ago, those words would have cut deep, activated the guilt and insecurity I'd carried throughout our marriage. Now they felt like final confirmation that I'd made the right choice. I put my phone away without responding and rejoined my real family, the one I'd chosen, the one that chose me back. "What's next for Morgan Events?" asked Daniel, the tech CEO whose company launch had been my first major client. I smiled, raising my glass to the sunset, painting the harbor gold. "Something authentic," I said, "something built on solid ground." Around me, glasses lifted in response. No empire, no dynasty, no pretense. Just the truth, finally, and the freedom to build something real from its foundation.